Let's see here. Okay. All right. I think we're live right now. We're just trying to get on to live. All right. Trying to see here. Want to make sure this is actually connecting here. All right, cool. Sorry guys about the pause there, but I wasn't getting a confirmation whether it was streaming on live. All right, we're live right now. All right, shalom everyone. I'm Brother Doug with the Awakened by Yahuwah Fellowship and Yahuwah Almighty and Yahushua Messiah. And I just want to say I trust all of our brothers and sisters who are keeping a similar calendar to us with the first sliver waxing crescent, vernal equinox biblical calendar. For those that are keeping Passover tonight and starting the Feast of Unleavened Bread tomorrow night, just want to say I trust you're having a very Baruch Feast of Pesach tonight and first day of Unleavened Bread tomorrow. So just wanted to get out of the way to say that. First, we're going to be going through tonight. Tomorrow is going to be our Torah portion as usual, Yahuwah willing, but it's going to be centered around Pesach and Festival of Unleavened Bread topic. But tonight we've had to recently tweak our understanding on certain things on the calendar. So we are running it back again with this calendar study. So let me get that on the screen for you guys. I'm going to show you guys what I'm talking about here. So let's go to share screen. All right, so we're going to call this the Scriptural Calendar or Biblical Calendar, okay? So, and we use mainly for the calendar, we're using the canon of Genesis to Revelations, but also we do, just FYI for those out there that don't know, we do use the Book of Enoch to determine what exactly the new moon is. And I know some people out there already have preconceived biases like, well, Doug, doesn't Scripture actually tell us what phase the new moon is? And actually, it doesn't. We've had preconceived biases that Psalms 81 tells us the new moon, but I'm going to show you guys the problem with that assumption. So let me see here. Let me go to my Google Docs here. Okay, so now we're going to type in scriptural. Okay, scriptural. Here we go. Biblical calendar. There we go. All right, so here we go, guys. And we're actually going to start off with the topic of the new moon here. Please follow with me to Psalms 81, verse 3 to 5. I'm going to be showing you something from the translations here, though, that are something to take into consideration. So first, let's see here. Let's go to Psalms 81, verse 3, because usually this is the verse in question that people say, well, technically this would contradict Enoch. And I'm going to show you guys how it doesn't contradict Enoch. I'm going to show you guys what you've not noticed before, okay? First, we're going to go to the Aramaic Peshitta version of this verse, which was translated into English by David Boucher. Okay, so we're going to get some context here, starting at verse 1. Praise Alua or Elohim, our champion, and cry to the Elohim of Jacob. Take tambourines and lyres and those pleasant on harps. Okay, so this is a callback. Even in verse 2, this is a callback to the Exodus event. If you understand that, that's what Miriam, Moshe's sister, was doing when they were going through the Red Sea crossing and all that. Okay. Call with trumpets at the first of the month and at the full moon on festival days. Now, usually how people read this is, well, Doug, the festival day that it's talking about is the new moon. Well, the problem here is to interpret it that way makes no logical sense because there's two statements being made.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? In one sentence. So how are you going to say the full moon is the same thing as the new moon when the new moon is the first part of the verse, the full moon is at the second half of the verse? It's two separate statements being made. Basically, to put it in layman's terms for you, the commandment here from the psalmist is saying, blow with a silver trumpet at the new moon and at the full moon on feast days, which, by the way, certain feast days of Leviticus 23 will happen to fall on full moons. Mm-hmm. So happened tonight. If you look out your window, what's tonight? A full moon. What's tonight? Passover. Okay. By the way, the festival that's being talked about in this chapter specifically, if you read further down and get some context, in the next 2 or 3 verses, that festival day that verse 3 is talking about Passover specifically. Okay, so it continues on to say, call with for this is the law for Yasharal, a judgment for the Elohim of Jacob. He appointed a testimony in Joseph when he went forth to the land of Egypt. He heard a language which he did not know. I personally like the New English translation of this verse a little bit better. It gets a little bit more specific what verse 5 is talking about. It says in the net version, it says he decreed it as a regulation. What did he decree it as a regulation? The Passover. Mm-hmm. In Joseph, when he attacked the land of Egypt. I heard a voice I did not recognize. So the net actually words it a little bit better to help you understand verse 5 is in the same context of verse 3 and 4. Okay, so that actual full moon verse 3 is talking about is the Passover. Okay, it's not talking about the new moon as a full moon or a covering. Okay, so again, the preconceived biases and misnotions we've had that have caused us to reject the book of Enoch. Just FYI, even though that's a whole nother topic, but just saying it, as far as the calendar goes, Enoch does not contradict the canon. Okay. Moving on. All right. So we're going to move on here. Now we're going to go to First Enoch 78 verse 12. So now we're getting a little apocryphal here. Okay. It says in First Enoch 78:12, when the first light hits the moon, it's called the new moon. So what it's saying here is when the moon has a first bit of light, it is called the new moon. Now, layman's terms, what is that? A sliver.
A sliver, yeah.
It's not that hard to understand. It's simple. That's what Enoch's telling you. So the reason why there's such a big controversy about what phase is the new moon is the only book that tells you what phase it is. Oh, that's not scripture. Whole nother topic for a whole nother day, but that's the reason we have so much division in the body of Messiah, in my opinion, is that everyone wants to throw away the book of Enoch. Anyway, moving on. End of my rant there. We're going to go to Exodus chapter 12. So we just looked at Enoch 78. For anyone that will be seeing this on YouTube, we just read Enoch 78 verse 12. We went through Psalms 81, 3-5. Okay, so again, so now we're going to be going to Exodus 12 verse 2. We're going to start off with there, okay? So Exodus 12 verse 2. Okay, it says, This month shall be to you the beginning of months. It is the first to you among the months of the year. Self-explanatory. So the month they came out of Egypt is supposed to be the first month of their calendar. Very simple to understand. By the way, they did not go out of Egypt in January. Just FYI. Okay. I'm just saying, okay. January 1st is not the new year. I'm just saying. Okay. All right. Deuteronomy 16, verse 1. So we're going to go to Deuteronomy chapter 16, verse 1. And I'll give you guys time to get there. Okay. All right. So Deuteronomy 16, verse 1 says, observe the month of new grain. And again, grain is not literally there. I get that in the Greek, it just says new, but it's inferred. Okay. It's talking about the age of the barley. Okay, so observe the month of new grain, and you shall sacrifice the Passover to Yahuwah your Elohim, because in the month of new grain you came out of Egypt by night. So what the Septuagint does with the Hebrew word Abib, they just outright tell you the meaning, what Abib means. Abib is referring to the age of the barley, basically. FYI, that's what it means. Okay. Brother Joshua earlier tonight, when I was preparing for this study, he gave me another cross-reference that adds to the Septuagint definition, adds another witness to that's what Abib means, rather than the supposable definition that the King James incorrectly gives as early ears or green ears. Joshua chapter 3, verse 15 shows that the Septuagint definition of the word Abib is correct. Okay. So Joshua chapter 3, verse 15. And when the priests that bore the ark of the covenant of Yahuwah entered upon Jordan, and the feet of the priests that bore the ark of the covenant of Yahuwah were dipped into the water of the Jordan. Now the Jordan overflowed all its bank about the time of wheat harvest. So this is showing here that the grain would have had to be ripe enough for them to be plucking the wheat. Okay, so it gives you the idea that that the grain would have to be at a certain stage. It's the time of wheat harvest. And actually, I think if you look at the Greek here, let me just check this real quick in Joshua chapter 3, verse 15, because I think it even says ripened is the word here. Let me see here, Joshua 3:15. Okay, so just bear with me, guys. Bear with me a second here. All right, so the priest lifting up so it in the days of harvest. Okay, so the Greek word here for harvest is G2326, therismos. Therismos means reaping. Now that's key phrase. It was the days of reaping or harvesting, meaning the crop would have been well enough to be reaped. It would have been, ripe enough to be reaped. Okay, so that's how we know it had to have been a certain time of the year and all that. So, anyway, so we're gonna move on. We're gonna go to the next cross reference we have. We're going back to Exodus here. We are going to be going to chapter 13 of Exodus, starting at verse 4. Okay, so Exodus 13, verse 4. Okay. All right. And again, it says in the Septuagint version in Exodus chapter 13, verse 4, it says, for on this day you go forth in the month of new grain. Then there's another cross reference, which we're about to get to next. We're going to be going to Exodus 23:15. I'll give my mom time to get there because she's got a physical scripture on her. So give her some time to get there. All right, here we go. Exodus 23:15 says, take heed to keep the feast of unleavened bread. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread. as I charged you at the season of the month of new grain, for in it you came out of Egypt. You shall not appear before me empty-handed or empty. Okay, so again, it says in the month of new grain is the season that you're keeping the Feast of Unleavened Bread and that you're eating unleavened bread in. Okay, so from there, we're now going to shift gears and go to the book of Leviticus here. We're going to be going to Leviticus 23:14 and then 15. And we got some interesting expoundings here in the Targums to help us understand what's going on here. And actually, this is kind of interesting. If you look at the Septuagint here, it's almost identical with the Targums of this verse in verse 14. It says, and you shall not eat bread or the new parched grain until this same day, until you offer the sacrifice to your Elohim, it a perpetual statute throughout your generations, all your dwellings. You know what's really important here is the parched grain. It says new parched grain in the Septuagint in the same context of, the month of new grain, which we've been reading about here. That's what a beeb means. Okay, so what it's showing here is they had to offer newly ripened grain to Yahuwah as a wave offering before eating that new grain that has been ripened. So if you think about it, if you start your Abib when the grain hasn't even ripened yet, how would they be able to give this offering on the first day of unleavened bread? There's no way. It's impossible. Again, so moving on. Just FYI, if you look at the Targum of Pseudo Jonathan, it literally in that same verse says ripened grain for where it says newly parched grain for the Septuagint. The Targum says ripened grains, just FYI there. Okay, verse 15. In my opinion, one of the most misunderstood verses out there when calculating, trying to figure out how to calculate which Sabbath this is referring to and how to calculate Pentecost 50 days after the day after this particular Sabbath. Okay, so it says here, and you shall number to yourselves from the day after the Sabbath, from the day on which you shall offer the sheaf of heave offering 7 full weeks. So now what we got to figure out here, okay, so it says 7 full weeks, right? So, okay, so it's talking about 49 days after the first day you start to count. But the day prior is called the Sabbath. Now, which Sabbath is it referring to? Now, I'm going to tell you, I personally believe this Sabbath is being referred to is the first day of unleavened bread. If you actually look at multiple Targums, they paraphrase the word the Sabbath as the festival day. Now, obviously, we know the first festival day of the week of unleavened bread is the first day of unleavened bread, aka if this is the day that you're offering the Omer of elevation, that means the first day of unleavened bread would be the same day as first fruits. Okay, it's not a separate feast, but it's the same exact day as the first day of unleavened bread. And that's how the Targums read. It says, and count to you after the festival day, from the day that you brought the Omer of the elevation 7 weeks, complete shall they be. And the only difference in the other Targum is that it actually gets even more specific than the Unkelos one. It actually says after the first feast day of Passover. Now, what you got to understand historically is around the time of Yahusha, they started calling the week of unleavened bread the week of Passover. So what it's actually saying is it's saying the first feast day of the week of Passover. So which would be the first day of unleavened bread. Mm-hmm. So you understand what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Okay.
I'm just noticing that I find it interesting. I just figured out what this term means, Feast of Weeks.
Yeah.
You know what
Pentecost,
I'm saying?
yeah.
And it's Pentecost, but I just sort of clicked it together why it would be called
the only reason we call it Pentecost, Mom, is because pent means 50. Mm-hmm. The Greek word for 50, I think, is pent. So Pentecost, 50 weeks. So it or 50 days, whatever.
Yeah.
But the only reason it's different in the Greek is because they're getting the name from the actual days. So the Shavuot is the original Hebrew name, which is Feast of Weeks, and that's what you get in English. But yeah, it's the same exact thing. And actually the Feast of Weeks is when you actually give the first fruits offering.
Right.
And as we go to verse 15 here, so I just wanted to make a note, though. Verse 15, according to multiple Targums, the way they paraphrase that Sabbath is being referred to the day of first fruits, aka the first day of unleavened bread, as the Sabbath that's being referred to. So just FYI, I just wanted to try to explain that there and give a little bit of expounding to that so people can understand that and not be confused and think it's the weekly Sabbath, because I know many people have misunderstood that and think you're supposed to count after the weekly Sabbath. Okay, so technically your 50-day count at Pentecost should actually start on the second day of unleavened bread. So just that's how it's being phrased there. So until the day after the 7th week, number 50 days, and offer a new grain offering before Yahuwah. Verse 16 there. So verse 16 is talking about the 50-day count to Pentecost. Okay, so that's Leviticus 23:16. So far we went verses 14, 15, and 16. Now we're going to be going to Leviticus 23:4-11. Okay, in their appointed times. So we're going to be going up in this chapter here to the prior verses 4-11. These are the festivals of Yahuwah, set apart convocations, which you shall call in their seasons or appointed times. In the first month, on the 14th day of the month, between the suns or sunsets, is the Pascha before Yahuwah, the Passover before Yahuwah. Now, notice how it says before the sunsets. I mean, between the sunsets. Now, let me explain to you. Those that want to say that this means that you're supposed to keep it at the end of the 14th, the problem with that is by the time it's the end of the 14th at sunset, you're already at the 15th. See, the way Yahuwah reckoned days is at sunset, a new day begins.
Right.
So, for example, those that are keeping Passover tomorrow night, you're keeping it a day late, because by the time it's the end of this weekly Sabbath, you're already at the 15th of Abib. So just explaining why that's incorrect according to Leviticus 23 verse 5. Okay, then it continues on to say, verse 6, and on the 15th day of this month is the feast of unleavened cakes before Yahuwah. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread. In the first day you shall have a set apart convocation. No laborious work shall you do, but you shall offer an oblation before Yahuwah 7 days. In the 7th day there shall be a set apart gathering. No laborious work may you do. And Yahuwah spake with Moshe, saying, speak to the sons of Yasharel, say to them, when you have entered into the land that I will give unto you, and you reap its harvest, you shall bring a omer, the first of your harvest, unto the priest. And this exposes to the idea that Abib would start when the crops start to grow. The problem with that is we see here, right here in verse 10, the crops have to be ripe enough to give him the omer. So how would you think about it? If you're going to call it when the barley's green and not even ripe, how would that even work?
Doesn't work.
So that's why I'm showing this to everyone here on YouTube. This is why you got to let Scripture interpret Scripture here. Okay, so he says, he shall uplift the omer, so it's talking about the wave offering, before Yahuwah to be accepted for you. After the day of the festival shall the priest uplift it. And you shall perform on the day of elevation of Omer the sacrifice of unblemished lamb of the year as a burnt offering to Yahuwah.
Okay, so let's see here. Okay, so let's see here. All right. And I think we're done with Leviticus 23, 4 to 11. Okay, so Psalms 104:19, because I know there's a lot of confusion out there with different calendars of people out there, and certain people believe we should be keeping a solar only calendar. This verse, in my opinion, exposes what people have been calling the Zadokite. In my opinion, you might as well call it what it is, the Jubilees calendar, because this shows you that you're not supposed to go by the sun for months or appointed times. Okay, it says here, Psalms 104, verse 19. Okay, it says, he appointed the moon for seasons. The sun knows his going down. Now, if you look even in the Masoretic text, okay, what's the Hebrew word for seasons here? H4150, moad, appointed place, appointed time, meaning appointed time, sacred season, set, feast, appointed season. Okay, so this verse is literally talking about the luminary. The moon was made for the festivals, not the sun. Okay, so that's the major problem for a solar only calendar. You're actually transgressing Psalms 104:19 if you do, what they call the Zadokite or Jubilees calendar. I will not call it the Enoch calendar. I know a lot of people want to call it the Enoch calendar, but Enoch does not promote a solar calendar. Okay, so anyway, moving on. So also I have a little footnote here that a second witness to this, that you don't only go by the sun for the calendar, is Genesis 1:14. It says, and Elohim said, so this is Genesis chapter 1, verse 14. And Elohim said, let there be lights, plural, in the firmament of the heaven, to give light upon the earth, to divide between day and night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and for years. Okay, so let's break this down here. Which luminaries are for what? Okay, well, let's interpret scripture with scripture. If you go to Leviticus 23, I think it's 39, it says that from sunset to sunset, you should keep your Sabbaths. Mm-hmm. The sun determines the days, right? Mm-hmm. We know that for a fact. Yep. What determines the months? The moon. Why? Because even etymologically, if you trace back the English word month, it goes back to the word moon. Okay, so that's just a fact. So the moon has always determined the months. The days have always been determined by the sun. The years, in my opinion, would be the stars. That's my opinion. I believe that's the luminary being given either prophetically for years or even just years in general. The stars would be that luminary for the years. That's from what I see how it should be interpreted, that verse. Okay, so moving on. And we're going to get into some other apocryphal literature that proves that the moon was definitely for months, and that the word month was definitely named after the moon. So we're going to get to that soon in some apocrypha from the King James and the Septuagint. So anyway, so I have a quick note here from the book of Isaiah, chapter 2, verse 3. A lot of people use this verse and say we have to go by the sightings in Jerusalem and in Israel that we have to use that to figure out the new moon. But what they fail to realize here is, if you look at it in context in Isaiah chapter 2, verse 3, it's talking about a millennial context. Number one. Number two, Yahuwah never says you have to calculate your days by Jerusalem time, or it doesn't matter if you're scattered, you have to look at Jerusalem to sight the moon and all that. Okay, he never commands us in Torah to do that. So let's look at Isaiah chapter 2, verse 3 in context here. It says, Isaiah chapter 2, verse 3, and many nations shall go and say, come and let us go up to the mountain of Yahuwah into the house of the Elohim of Jacob. And he, hold on, what? Who? He will tell us his ways. So is this right now, or is this his second coming? This is obviously referring to his second coming. It says he will tell us, meaning we're going to see him as he is, face to face. He's going to teach us his Torah verbatim from his own mouth. And we will walk in it, for out of Zion shall go forth the law. When is the law coming out of Zion, though? When he is in our midst, when he's actually here. This is all millennial context, guys. Okay. For out of Zion shall go forth the law and the word of Yahuwah out of Jerusalem. Because I guarantee you guys, the word of Yahuwah is not going forth out of Jerusalem right now. They're the capital of Tel Aviv. My bad. The Tel Aviv is pretty much the gay capital of the world, guys. So to try to apply this to modern Israel and that we can apply this right now, no, that's not the context that it's giving here. Okay, this is post second coming context at the minimum. Okay, and it says that he will be teaching us his ways when this is happening. Okay, so
Isn't that interesting? In my Bible, it's got a little subtitle right before that. It says "in the last days."
Yeah,
it actually says that in my NIV, in the last days.
Yeah. So the NIV understands that this is a end time context. It's not right now. Okay. So going back to the book of Enoch, why the book of Enoch is so important to the calendar here. This is another thing that the canon fails to mention, just is silent on is, okay, so how do we do this? How do we calculate the year when the new year starts with the equinoxes? Well, Enoch tells you that, okay, it actually validates the equinox as the last day of the previous year. Okay. So first Enoch 72, verse 32, on this day, it's equal day and equal night, the vernal equinox. And it hints in the context of that verse, it hints that it is the turn of that year. It is the last day of that previous year, which, by the way, science has figured that out too. What do you know? Anyway, so moving on. If we go to also first Enoch 73 verse 4, chapter 73 verse 4, this is a second witness to the new moon being the first sliver here, the first crescent. Okay, it says chapter 73 verse 4 of first Enoch, and thus she rises, and her first phases in the east comes forth on the 30th morning, and on that day she becomes visible, and constitutes for you the first phase of the moon on the 30th day, together with the sun in the portal where the sun rises. Okay. Again, it's just saying that she's in a portal or in the heavens, the firmament with the sun when the sun's rising. It's not saying that we go by the sun to calculate the months. Okay. That's in context what it's saying in Enoch, rather than what people claim Enoch's saying. Okay. Anyway, going back here. So let's see here. All right. So now we're at 1 Samuel. 1 Samuel chapter 20, verse 5. And to me, in my opinion, just conjecture here, this verse seems to prove why the new moon can't be the conjunction, because David already knew ahead of time that the next day was going to be the new moon. So, according to other brothers and sisters that have told me that that's kind of impossible if you're going to go by the dark moon to be able to predict it a whole day ahead of time, when half of the time it differs from month to month when the conjunction happens, at what time of the day it happens. So that would be kind of almost impossible for David to know that ahead of time. Even with Farmer's Almanac, that'd be kind of hard. So in my opinion, this seems to hint that it would be a lot easier, definitely, if the new moon is a sliver, for him to be able to predict it, and just to know, by default, that it's the day after the conjunction. So anyway, but 1 Samuel chapter 20 verse 5 says, and David said to Jonathan, Behold, tomorrow the new moon, and I shall not on any account sit down to eat, but you shall let me go, and I will hide in the plain till the evening. Okay, so again, so David knew literally 24 hours ahead of time that the next day was going to be the new moon, the first day of the next month. Okay, so now we're going to go to the book of Sirach here, which, by the way, was originally in the KJV 1611, and also to this day is in the Septuagint canon. It's also known as Ecclesiasticus. More commonly, it's called Ecclesiasticus. But the book of Sirach has some interesting things to say about the moon, referring to the calendar. Let me just try to get it here. Where's my books? I think it's in my books. Okay, I don't know what's going on here. I guess I got nothing there. I don't know. My sword kind of just froze a little bit there. I don't know what the heck that was about. Yeah, hold on, guys. Hold on. Sorry about these tough technical difficulties, guys. If I have to, I'll just read it from my document if I have to. I don't know why. Okay, yeah, so I'll just read from the document here. I'll go get back to the document. Okay, let's drop down to Sirach, aka Ecclesiasticus, chapter 43, verses 6 to 8. And this is from the 1851 Breton's English translation of the Septuagint. It says, "He made the moon also to serve in her season, for a declaration of times." Sound familiar? Genesis 1:14. "From the moon is the sign of feasts." Psalms 104:19. "A light that decreases in her perfection. The month is called after her name. Increasing wonderfully in her changing, being an instrument of the armies above." Talking about the angels and all that, the stars. "Shining in the firmament of heaven." And again, that's from the Breton's English translation of the LXX Septuagint. Okay, so that's pretty much the conclusion of our study. Like I said last year, I hope this even more tweaking we've done to this calendar study has helped you better understand Yahuwah's calendar and what we believe to be Yahuwah's original scriptural calendar. And I know many other people have different calendars, but I believe, in my opinion, in conjecture, my belief, this is the closest that I've seen so far to the original calendar that Yahuwah would have given to the Israelites, from the mouth of Masha, from the mouth of Moses. So I personally believe this is the closest we could possibly get in 2022 to the original calendar. So if anyone has any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. Those of you on YouTube, feel free to comment. I'm pretty sure you will. Pretty sure we'll get some trolling comments on the video, on the live video. Feel free to reach out to me. I'm still on Facebook. I'm on the Torah Network, Instagram. Anywhere you see me, Douglas Bonensegna. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions. If you need any more clarity about things I was going through, I was trying to go as slow as possible to be as clear as possible for everyone out there. So thank you for those of you that have joined us, and to all of those that are keeping Pesach tonight. I just want to say Chag, Samak, Pascha. Have a great feast of Passover tonight and feast of unleavened bread for all of this upcoming week. And